Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. I'm your host, Marty Bennett, and this week on the Roundup, we're going to be answering 3 questions we've been hearing from international educators this past week that cover a range of issues that are intensely relevant to our international education profession. We'll get to those questions in just a minute, but first I want to say a special shout out to those of you watching live here on Facebook, those watching on repeat, either on our YouTube channel or the Facebook page for SMIE Consulting, and of course those that are making our Roundup a regular part of their podcast listening through downloading that and making us a part of your journey. We're over 1,300 downloads now for our weekly Roundups, and very happy to be a part of your edification, we hope, each week. So let's get to our questions today, which all come from stories, news stories we've been seeing in various international presses from not only U.S. sources, but global sources as well. And that's something we really focus on here. Obviously, we're in international education, a world that is very fluid and increasingly smaller in terms of how connected we all are, but increasingly larger in terms of the problems that we're facing in our world today. We catalog a lot of these news stories each week in our newsletter, all the SMIE News Fit to Share, and that stands for Social Media and International Ed News, 2 different sections. And you'll have stories, probably 5 to 7 social media stories, oftentimes where they overlap with international education, as well as probably 25 to 30 international ed stories that highlight some of the key areas, both in the United States, but also globally in different important markets on what some of the issues are with some of our competitors. So this newsletter is available free of charge to those who wish to subscribe. I'm dropping a link to this week's edition in the comments section on the Facebook page for SMIE Consulting, so you can get the link for that to subscribe to the newsletter. Again, it comes to your mail inbox Mondays at 9 a.m. Eastern each week. You can also subscribe on the smieconsulting.org/subscribe website link. And we'll be hopefully adding to our subscribers to this and making this a much more widely distributed mail service for international educators. So please share it with your friends. Let's get right into the questions. First up is, what is the state of global social and digital media? I always like to keep a finger on the pulse on what's going on in the wider world when it comes to trends with use of social media platforms, worldwide access to the internet, mobile usage, all of that. All of it impacts kind of how we need to focus our recruitment strategies when we're talking about international education and bringing students to this country. And one of my primary source for this is the team at We Are Social that do really the hard graft in terms of gathering the data each quarter and each year to present their quarterly reports and yearly reports on the state of digital in April 2021, which is what today's question is really driven by. This article, it kind of highlights some of the key trends that you want to be aware of in what you do in international education. World population now at 7.85 billion people. And interestingly, we're now at 60% of the world's population, which would make it 4.72 billion people, now have access to the internet. That's grown by 7.6% in the last year. These are some of the high-level stats and facts reported by the We Are Social team, who I might add have also recently teamed up with Hootsuite as part of their data gathering resources, which has also driven up Hootsuite's monthly prices substantially from $10 a month to now $75 a month for one-person user, up to 10 platforms. So I'm not too happy with Hootsuite. I've been a long-time user for over 10, 11 years now, but I'm not sure I'm seeing the full value of what they're bringing. But that's a story for another day, another conversation offline. But with regard to this report that they've teamed up with We Are Social on, there are now, we said 4.72 billion people in the world that have internet access. 5.27 billion people in the world also now use mobile devices. So that is an important part. That means more than 2/3 of all the people on the earth now have a mobile phone. So pretty significant. Then we also have, in the last 12 months, we've had more than 500 million people, 500 million people joined social media platforms over the past year. And now that puts that total at 4.33 billion people in the world are now on social media. So a lot of different nuances behind these facts, and the full article that I'm dropping a link to in the comments section on the Facebook page will go into those. But it's really fascinating to see not only the growth of internet access around the world, which is a good thing. People's access to information is consistently growing. What is also important, I think, and when you look in terms of the next 3 billion, the unconnected populations in the world. For example, in the U.S., only 6.3% of the world's internet users live in the United States, but 13% are in India, 21% in China. So there's a lot of neat data points in here that if you're into those kind of things, good conversation starters at dinner or in your office. I think that's important to keep our fingers on the pulse there. What I will say, there's a couple of interesting pieces that they look at here. They've started created a category for world's favorite social platform. Two disclaimers in this in the data set that they're looking at here. They do not include YouTube as a social platform, rather as a video platform, and also they do not include Chinese social media, which are are accessible outside of China, are pretty much unique to the Chinese multiverse in terms of their internet world. So that's, but if you look at, and you had to guess what the world's most popular or favorite social platform is, what would your first guess be? If we're not looking at China, we're not looking at YouTube, what would you think it would be? Probably Facebook, right? Though it's not Facebook, it's a Facebook property, and it's WhatsApp. It's the world's favorite platform, social platform. So interesting to see these numbers, and in terms of the total usage here, the data that on the charts here really show a quarter of internet users aged 16 to 64 say WhatsApp is their favorite social media platform. So that's interesting to note. Facebook is second. Overall, Facebook's 4 main platforms account for more than 2/3 of global favorites outside of China. Twitter ranks 4th as a worldwide at the worldwide level, though fewer than 5% of respondents chose this. So that's Twitter at present rates higher than TikTok. It's a little bit interesting. It's interesting that TikTok's included in a social platform when YouTube is a video platform, and so is TikTok, but it's a maybe short form video. That's interesting to see. But really great data coming out of We Are Social as always. So always like to plug those data, keep those data points kind of in the center part of your mind as you look towards understanding where opportunities are for you to have a greater presence online. If you're looking at international students and what markets, in what markets certain social media platforms make sense. We Are Social does do country level reports as well. They don't go quite as in depth into the social media platforms in each country necessarily that give you that kind of insight. Some they do, some they don't. Some mostly major markets. But there's another group that I've began following, WebCertain, in the last year or so. They also have a kind of a service fee that you can buy to get access to that data, country level reports that do go into best social media platforms in each market. So that's another thing. Certainly, anyone who wants to have access to that, just let me know, and I'll be sure to share links to those. Now, that's what is the state of global social digital media? It's expanding, ever expanding. When you think in a year, 500 million more people in the world have started using social media. When you think now 60% of the world are on the internet, and 2/3 of the world have a mobile phone. So the access is there. It's increasing every year at dramatic rates in some places of the world. Other parts, obviously, we're already at saturation. So it's interesting to keep a sense and keep a global perspective on this as well. That yes, not every country, maybe in the U.S., Facebook is no longer the it platform to be on, but you look at Facebook's user base with over 2 billion users now. Got to think that 150, 175 million in the U.S. are on Facebook. So that more than 1.7 billion people are not on Facebook outside the United States, or are on Facebook outside the United States. So good to have that perspective on things. And as other platforms grow in other parts of the world, you see just how important some of these older platforms to us in the U.S. are still super relevant on the global stage. Now let's shift gears to the second question, and that is, how will travel happen this year for students? And my goodness me, this is, we thought we had a rough fall last year, summer and fall last year, in terms of expectations for students that were admitted, hoping to come. COVID wrecked the dreams of a lot of students trying to physically get to the United States last year. We had probably, of the new international students that universities reported starting in the fall, 20% of those were studying remotely from their home countries. That's from some of the IIE's fall snapshot data last year. We also see students who deferred admissions for a year, took a gap year, and maybe that's if they deferred a year, maybe they're looking to still come in the fall, maybe they're not. There's going to be some melt from that group in terms of who's coming. And then you've got all these students that have applied as it were their first year, that they, in their normal cycle, would be coming to the United States for studies, either for bachelor's or master's or doctoral programs, maybe even associates or ESL programs. But you see what the challenges are right now. We've talked about them, about the access to visa interviews at consulates. Right now it's appointments only, emergency appointments only at almost half the consulates in the world, if they're even open. And for those that are open, we're looking at, we'll get to the data on this in a minute, but we're looking at a playing field that has changed dramatically, where now for U.S. citizens who are looking to go abroad, U.S. State Department last week, and there's been new news this week, which we'll get to in a little bit, but the U.S. will boost do not travel advisories. That's that level 4 travel advisory, do not travel, to 80% of the world's countries. Now, that as a health advisory, that's a CDC recommendation. State Department's following up on that and making that a recommendation for U.S. citizens. We've also seen this week, and we'll cover these stories less and less as we get closer to them, because the news keeps coming thick and fast. We've seen this week 2 things happen. U.S. citizens who are fully vaccinated can go to Europe and the UK. That's kind of the exemption to that 80% of the world, which will include many of those European countries. If you're not vaccinated, they will say don't travel. If you are vaccinated, they'll say going to Europe is okay. So that's encouraging, at least for some of us who might be thinking about getting out. Then you also see the challenge also this week. We'll talk about this news story a bit in coming weeks as well. You saw the State Department declare that many of the countries that are on this 80% do not travel list and have been part of the COVID ban for travel, including China, Brazil, Iran, other countries that are major senders to the United States. There was a national interest exemption memo sent out this week by State Department that allows those students that are looking to return and new students who can get visas the opportunity to be exempted from those travel restrictions for entry into the United States. So that's positive. So that's a sign from this administration that they are making exemptions for international students, even in these countries that are on do not travel list to the United States. That's something that I think is important for us to keep in mind as we think about larger, and where that maybe tends to point in the direction where we're moving about availability of visas, because that really will be the bottom line. But there's a PI News article this past week on this very issue, on the availability of visas, consulates opened so that visas can be issued. That's PI News reports, and the data set that I've seen as well, that our friends at Brighter Ed keep a hold of, and that is of the 265 U.S. embassies and consulates around the world, 123, so a little less than half, probably 47%, are either closed, temporarily closed, or only offering emergency appointments. So that's a huge reduction, and most of those, the major sending countries, China especially, have been closed for quite some time, and there's a huge backlog there. But you have seen in recent days, and a couple of weeks ago, the Consul General in India indicated that student visas will become available. Embassies and consulates will be open for that, and they expect to be able to meet demand in the coming 4 months before classes begin in the fall. That certainly was great to hear that, and we'll have another news story about that next week in our newsletter. But as anyone who's been paying attention to COVID numbers around the world and some of the challenges other countries are facing, India is right in the throes of a huge second wave and huge shortages of basics like oxygen at hospitals to take care of those people who are at the earlier stages, shortage of drugs to treat those initial symptoms of COVID. So there's some real basic needs that a country the size of India is really going through its worst period, its darkest days of the COVID crisis. So our thoughts and prayers go out to our colleagues in India and to stay safe. And even with our Education USA friends have had to cancel a series of virtual events even they're not able to move forward with right now because of the severity of the lockdowns and restrictions that are being put in place there. So, but the visa issue will continue to come up, and we're getting closer to peak visa season starting in middle of May. And we'll have another brief bit of news on that next week, I'm sure, on what the prospects are looking like for consulates to be opened more widely across the globe, and in particular key markets. So we'll keep our fingers on that one. Related to this, how the travel piece will happen, university presidents oftentimes get a lot of press, particularly at the more selective schools, when they raise their heads up and speak out on issues. We saw that happen last summer with when the Trump administration was proposing a ban on any students coming in that were coming for hybrid or online courses if they were returning students. But that was fortunately not implemented after only a week as a result of a huge groundswell of public support and institutional support for that. For bringing down that ban. But university presidents like Larry Bacow at Harvard, he has urged USCIS to ease the return to campus for international students by permanently, and I love this, permanently increasing visa flexibility in a letter sent on Monday, where right now, based on the Trump administration rule, international students requiring F1s were unable to enter the United States if they were coming for the first time, if their courses were fully remote. So that left Harvard's first-year international students scattered around the globe and basically studying remotely or deferring, or perhaps finding a study partner, a university partner of Harvard's where they could begin their classes. So this is something I've been talking about for a while, because not just for continuing students, which we've also found out this week, CIS, DHS, have extended the March 20th rule from last year that allowed returning students or continuing students to continue to study remotely and not lose status, to be able to be enrolled in person full-time, or in person in the United States, even though the courses might be online or hybrid. That's still allowed. So that's been extended through the next academic year, which is fantastic. And it's fairly forward-thinking when you think about it for DHS, which tends to be a very slow-moving beast. It's good to see that kind of a policy come out. We'll have more on that next week as well in the newsletter. But there's definitely movement, and I think a recognition on the part of state, on the part of the administration and DHS, that we need to be putting together policies that are common sense. And certainly Larry Bacow's recommendation to have this permanent option for hybrid or online courses for international students who want to come to the United States. And I think the big difference in if this were ever adopted would be to make it extended for new students, not just continuing students, because obviously the USCIS action does address the continuing student piece and will allow that for this next academic year, which is fantastic. But it still doesn't account for getting those new students from last year and new students coming this year in through the country, which obviously isn't DHS's responsibility other than CPP at the border, allowing them in. It's the consulates and embassies that are going to be key to that. Another news story related was another PI news story about Chinese students, obviously the most critical demographic for U.S. higher education in terms of current number of international students, where it's a news story entirely about Chinese students heading to Singapore in search of U.S. visas. And they're doing that because the consulate embassy is open there in Singapore for visa appointments. And there are other countries as well where the U.S. embassies might be open. So students are looking in search of U.S. consulates that are open because they want to really realize their dream of studying in the United States this fall. So it's encouraging to see this. And I think there's going to be more like that there's the drive and the desire to study in the U.S. is fairly high, higher than I think a lot of prognosticators give our students' interest in the U.S. credit for. Is they're willing to go to the extreme lengths and extreme costs to realize their dreams of studying in the United States. So we'll keep our eyes out on that one because that's a story I think is going to rumble on throughout the summer in terms of access to visa appointments around the world. So let's shift gears and talk in a bigger picture context of international education, international enrollment management, strategic international enrollment management, and focus on the question, can you survive without international partnerships these days? The world is a very different place than when I entered the profession in 1993. As a first trip as an international educator, going for a week to Switzerland and Germany on an organized tour, and then having a conference or visiting high schools and meeting counselors at this conference from all over Europe. And the world was very different. We at a time we had partners in terms of, like, we did a tour. We couldn't have done a tour. We hadn't really done a lot of tours by ourselves. We were going on physical tours, and that was about it in terms of our partnerships at that point. We were beginning to really explore working with overseas advisors. At that time, that overseas advisors is what they called Education USA. It didn't morph to Education USA until early 2000. So the partnerships piece today is dramatically different than it was. It was kind of like, yeah, it might help a little bit here and there, help us get somewhere, go to schools efficiently, that type of thing. But today, to try and do international admissions, international enrollment, international recruitment planning without the use of partners is impossible. And I've been delving into this issue quite a bit in my series of the 6 Ps of Strategic International Enrollment Management. It's a series I've been doing for IDP Connect. This is the 4th month, or the 4th P that came out just this past week, and that's the 4th P is partnerships. Talking about what kind of partnerships matter and how partnerships can and should be used in creating an enrollment management plan for international students that really makes sense, that incorporates people that can help you achieve your institutional goals, but also not just external partners, whether that be Education USA, U.S. Commercial Service, educational agents you're working with, university partners overseas, institutional partners. It could be any secondary school networks that you're connected into, counselors that your colleagues with that are become feeder schools for your institution. But it also talks about and importantly, your on-campus partners. That these are the people who support international education on your campus. These are the people who are touching the lives of your international students outside your admissions or ISSS office. It's your financial aid, it's your housing, it's your student employment, it's the registrar's office, it's career services, it's alumni, that cover the full life cycle of international student journeys through before, during, and after your institution, they've attended your institution. So the partnerships piece, and I make this point in my article, dropping the link in the Facebook comments related to this live chat, and that is something that I think we can't underestimate the importance of our on-campus partners, because they can make or break the student experience. We all talk about wanting to make sure that students are taken care of once they get on campus, and that means the offices that you don't have direct influence over are aware of the issues that your students are going through, that are up to speed, particularly your leadership, your direct and senior leadership on campus are aware of the challenges that your students are facing, and that those that interact with them on campus are aware these are things that are unique to them that we need to be aware of and be compassionate toward as we have our conversations, as we build our relationships with the students while they're on campus. Because the more positive experiences they have on your campus, the better reports they will have to share with colleagues, family and friends about your institution when they leave. So there's so much value in partnerships in international education, and selecting the right ones to help you achieve your institutional goals is mission critical as far as I'm concerned. That you can't move on, and really it's not necessarily you must have X, Y, and Z partnerships in order to succeed. It's identifying the right partners that help have access to the tools that you need to help you achieve your goals in particular areas related to your international students' journeys, from whether it's the initial prospect stage where you're trying to get students interested, to the admissions process, to orientation and advising, to when they're searching for jobs and internships and preparation for life after graduation. And then alumni, how well are they treated at the back end of the process? Does your alumni office even care about where these students end up? Is there tracking data on graduation rates for internationals, job placement rates for internationals, where they are after graduation? All of those things, is that even part of what your institution does? And that's something I think is probably a real growth area for institutions. After they get the front end of the process right, they want to make sure they're doing things right on the back end too, for those outcomes that are so important for prospective students and their parents now, who are paying upwards of $250,000 for just tuition alone at some institutions, maybe more, to attend your institution. And to do that sight unseen and to convey that impression on how important that is, of a decision that is, and how much we kind of take for granted sometimes that students are just going to come. No, they're not. You really have to work for it, and you really have to have a system in place that cares for those students and anticipates needs and meets needs throughout their life cycle on your campus. And the partnerships you choose are going to be most important in helping you get to where you need to be. So that's a piece of the 6 Ps that we talk about. I'm implementing this 6 P strategy with a number of different institutions now as we look at program reviews and strategic planning efforts for next steps on how their approach needs to be and should be all-encompassing, a campus-wide community in terms of recruitment, enrollment, and managing those students once they're on campus. So if you'd like more information on that, please reach out and I'll be happy to share what that means. So that's what we have for you today on the Roundup. It's really been a pleasure coming to you, as it is every week, to share our thoughts on some of the key issues of our day and some tools, hopefully, and solutions that you can implement to help improve your circumstances for your international students on your campus. So until next time, we wish you a very successful conclusion to the week, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Cheers.